Welcome to another episode of Sit Down and Think, where we get the skinny on the latest happenings in animation. Netflix most recently dropped its latest animated venture called Dead End Paranormal Park, based off the acclaimed book series Dead India. Today, I'm joined by the creator of both the book and the animated series, Hamish Steele.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Honestly, it's very interesting being able to talk to you after seeing Dead End Paranormal Park, because as I was watching, I was like, wow, this is definitely a very different type of series than what we normally get.
I'm glad you say that. I think some people see the style and they compare it to a bunch of other stuff. Usually, I take it as a compliment because they're usually comparing it to shows I really love. But we did try and make something pretty unique in terms of story. So, yeah, thank you for saying that.
So I just want to know, so what exactly inspired Dead End? Like, there's certainly a lot of influence you could see throughout the series, but what exactly were the particular inspirations with this type of series?
So I'm like a huge horror fan, and I particularly love kind of weird 70s psychedelic sort of horror movies, things like Suspiria, which is what the Dead Endia comics were sort of named after, and things like that, where it's horror, but it's really colorful and really loud. And so I that's kind of the key inspiration from the kind of horror side of things. And to be honest, I like both. So it's all based on this kind of original short that I did for YouTube about 10 years ago now. And after I did that short, I turned it into the comics and now the show. And every time it's been like, getting a show or getting a short or getting the opportunity to do a comic, I just throw everything I love into one thing. So it's like the type of characters I like writing, the type of genre I like, which is this horror, the type of like comedy and sort of teen drama stuff that I think I'm like drawn to writing most. It just all kind of like is thrown together into what I want to make. And the times that I've tried to pitch other stuff and it's been a different genre, a different kind of show, they haven't been as successful because I think Dead End has always just been where everything I love about making animation has gone to, like a drip tray of all of my sort of interests. But yeah, so that original short, I pitched to, it was for Cartoon Hangover, who do like Bee and Puppy Cat and things like that. So they were looking for submissions, and I pitched something pretty different, but it had Barney and Norma in it, the main characters from the show. And they liked the characters, but they didn't love the plot. I kind of sent them a time travel plot thing, so it was like a lot of backgrounds, a lot of stuff. So I just chose a haunted house because I love Halloween. I love haunted house attractions. Any like theme park, the place I want to go to most is the scariest. My birthday's in October, so we used to go to the theme park at my birthday where it was all decorated as Halloween stuff. So maybe that explains everything. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, I definitely see a lot of like that childhood influence of, those horror theme parks you would see during around like Halloween time. So
yeah,
it is interesting, especially with this type of setting where because usually that is like a basic horror theme setting of just the haunted or abandoned amusement park, but in this case, it's a pretty much thriving amusement park. So it's definitely different to see how you can handle that, where it's like, oh, there are actual patrons here. Like, so now it's like there is the mystery element, but now it's like you kind of got to bob and weave, because it's like we can't exactly let all the secret out, because otherwise everyone's going to get scared off.
The theme park element came pretty late. In the original short, they're just living in a haunted house. It's just like a real haunted house. And then when I came to do the comics, I sort of grounded the world a little bit more. and I had to justify why these like teens lived in a haunted house with no supervision. And that's when the kind of theme park came about as just a justification for the main setting. But it's the theme parks now become one of the elements I love the most. And it's funny you said abandoned theme park because again, in the books, it's meant to be not a very successful theme park and a little bit run down. But when we started making the show, one note you get a lot in kids animation is sort of aspirational stories, or at least you want to make something that the kids watching want to be involved in. They want to be part of the adventures. So we decided to design like our dream theme park. And it was the element that the art team really enjoyed the most, like all the branding and designing just like trash cans and lampposts and all that stuff. And we got like loads of reference books of like Disneyland, and we went to a few other places. So yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, I totally can understand that part of wanting it to be something that connects to the kids, because like that's definitely something where they're always wanting to see something like a setting that they will want to be a part of, because a lot of TV shows, at least I could say probably on the American side of things, that their whole thing is, oh, we need a school to be relatable to kids, even though kids absolutely freaking hate school. So with this one, it's like, let's try a place that kids would want to be, because they've already dealt with the trauma of school. They want to deal. Let's put them in some place that they kind of want, but it's still kind of dangerous because supernatural stuff is happening.
Yeah, I've started writing a few pilots for adult comedy, and one of the big differences I find with kids shows and adult shows is like, take for example, I was if this was an adult show, it would probably be a rundown park, and you'd like lean into the like depressing grind of working at somewhere that's supposed to be fun, but it's like really soul crushing. And I think for kids shows, you sort of just, you don't get to that point yet. They haven't had those kind of jobs yet, so everything's amazing and exciting. But I think we've managed to get like a little balance. Like, I think I consider our show like a YA show, or like a young teen show, which when we pitched it, we had to make it a pitch for an 8 to 12 show because that's kind of all there was. But I think during production, I think things like Infinity Train really helped, and a few other, I think there's a few shows at HBO Max happening, which like you sort of allowed to pitch for that age group now, I think, which is good.
Oh yeah, I could definitely say as I was watching it, this felt like something. It's like, I know kids could have a good time with this, but I definitely know a lot of adults who would watch this and just really, really grasp a lot more with it. You know what I mean? Like, especially like going into some of the topics that you were able to touch upon with like a bunch of the LGBTQ plus like issues you were able to touch upon, because you guys managed to go in a route that was a bit different from what most would expect. Like, usually, like whenever shows or media touches on like LGBT plus issues, it's sometimes a choice of either go the more it's the way it should be route, where it's like everybody is accepting of it, and there's no, everyone just understands it's like, this is just this is how it is, like we just accept people for who they are and what they want to be and such, and who they want to be with. But then there's also the other route of, you got to show the real reality of it. It seems like you were going in the route of, let's show the reality of this situation, how crushing it could be when you're not fully supported and such. So I do want to ask, was there any point in making this series you had a conflict in which route to go?
Totally. I actually love shows that exist in kind of fantasy worlds, but like post bigotry. Like I get the appeal of that and the escapism, and I think that's definitely a route I would love a lot of kids shows to go in the sense that they are aspirational escapism. It's kind of teaching you the way the world should be. But I do think there's value in the way in our story and the way that we chose to go with it, because I it's that battle between like, oh, I relate to that character so much, which is, I think, how our audience have been talking about the show, and oh, I wish I was like that character, which is how a lot of the other shows take it, that more wish fulfillment way of doing it, which, I like I said, I think both are valid. And like, I was kind of worried while writing that people would hear that the show had like a trans lead, and then they start watching, and in the sort of first scene he has like a little a little conflict with his mum, and I didn't want people to like tune in and be sad that Barney wasn't like super happy and accepted 100% of the time. But it's also the reason why we didn't want it to be that his family were like extremely violent, extremely unforgivable. Our show kind of exists, I hopefully, in a kind of nuanced space where, because I mean, as a TV show, we were thinking some parents would be watching as well, so with their kids. So we wanted like lessons for both in a way. And we, as much as the show's from Barney's point of view, I think, I mean, I've been seeing this scene go around Twitter with a lot of opinions attached to it, where Barney says to, like, his parents say, oh, we accepted you, and Barney says that's what parents are supposed to do, that's the bare minimum. And I've seen a lot of people retweet that, saying that Barney seems really entitled there, and things like that. And I'm like, maybe he does. I think but maybe he doesn't. But I think if you watch the whole scene in context, the show, Barney makes mistakes, and Barney isn't completely in the right, and his parents aren't completely in the wrong. I think part of the point of the series is them, they're not communicating. They're not telling each other what they want. Then Barney runs away. We sort of deal with the fact that he kind of inherited that trait a bit from his mum, who also avoids confrontation. And like, it's meant to be nuanced. It's meant to be about them meeting in the middle, and not even in the middle. I think that, I do think his parents maybe are wrong in this situation from my point of view. But it's about his parents need, like, in that same episode, in that scene, Barney says he's sorry for running away. He says that that's a wrong thing to do. And the problem is his parents won't say sorry. They won't acknowledge that they have done anything wrong. And I think these are like, hopefully, realistic nuances that even a lot of, it's like challenging what being an ally is, I suppose. It's like, ally is a verb, not a noun, and I think a lot of people use it to sort of, it's not, but it should be. I think a lot of people like use it to defend themselves, like as a shield from criticism. And I think Barney's parents think they must be the best parents ever, but they've sort of dropped the ball in some places. I don't know. I just think, there's in answer to your question that I've now rambled on about, I think I love shows that don't deal with this, because you do need that escapism. And I totally get if some audiences watch this and it's like a bit too real, or a bit too, it's not what they wanted, they need to like watch it slowly. But as I've been going on, there's just like there's so much nuance and storytelling potential that I get very excited about as a writer.
Yeah, I definitely could say something like this is, honestly, I feel needed, and from what I've seen from some of my LGBTQ plus friends, they very much absolutely love the series. Like, they love that it's willing to actually challenge, like you said, that allyship, because that is a case. Like, some people wear ally like a badge of honor, but it's like, but are you putting the work in besides just saying, hey, I'm not homophobic or I'm not transphobic? It's like, are you actually defending them defending your friends when they need to be defended and such, and are you letting them speak up when it's their time to speak, and so on. And so I think that's kind of the nice thing that the show does hit that like nuance. Honestly, I think it does, because in a sense it is like Barney in this particular situation. Yeah, probably it would have been best to communicate first before deciding, hey, I'm just going to run away and just ignore the problem
Yeah.
and pretend like it's not there. But it is a case of the parents still should be more supportive, because it is true, like being a supportive parent is like the bare minimum. It's not just, oh, we birthed you and we gave you shelter and food and all the and a bit of love here and there, and that's it. It's like, no, that's your kid. If someone's talking bad about your kid, you need to pull that power parent move and start being angry. Get
Yeah.
almost pull a, like, just be that soccer mom at the game type stuff when someone's getting crazy, even if it's your own family. Like
And
that's something that they go. You go.
yeah, no, but I agree. I just think the show also explains that can be hard at times, and also Barney is a teenager and is filled with emotions and filled with, him running away is a bit of a rash decision in his particular situation. I know it's like life and death in other people's, and like the fact that he doesn't tell anyone, there's consequences for that. He sort of confronts his brother at one point, who basically thought he was dead or something. There's like one moment where we see his mum, and she's really like flippant about him running away, as if it's like, oh, he does this all the time. Yeah, I just think it's fun to explore, and it's definitely the element of the show that we debated the most. And in the writers' room, there were like drafts of the first episode, which were a lot more grim, I suppose, where we saw a bit more of how his parents acted. There are certain drafts of the show where there were like missing posters for Barney around the place, and we like really lent into that element of the show. But yeah, finding this balance was really tough. So people saying that it was good was very touching, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's just something a lot of people, and this is something I think I mentioned in my like first impressions videos, that it's definitely, you're interested in the supernatural of it, but you're very much going to stay for the character dynamics and everything, especially the hard truths that it's willing to touch upon that you just don't see in a lot of kids series. Like, it's willing to, because this is a show that's willing to say, hey, this is a real issue, let's talk about it, let's be adults about this, and let's be nuanced about it, because we know it, because it's not as simply a black and white issue. It's there's some stuff to actually be treaded upon precisely. And I think honestly, you guys were able to successfully touch upon that to the point, because it clearly resonates with a lot of people in the animation LGBTQ plus community. Like, I constantly see so many people praise it for that. Like, I constantly see so many people praise, even the happier moments, like Barney's song that he's singing to or singing about, like his love song. And don't get me wrong, it's catchy. It's really catchy. I enjoy it. I enjoy that song a lot. But
Oh,
yeah.
good. Yeah, the musical episode was, getting a show made is a dream come true, and then getting to do that was a cherry on top for me. I love musicals, and like even that episode, the original inspiration for it was still horror. We wanted it kind of references a lot of horror musicals like Little Shop of Horrors and Rocky Horror and Phantom of the Opera, obviously. Just things that I think there's like a weird connection between the sort of heightened reality of musicals and horror. But yeah, thank you.
Okay. To kind of continue on about that, about like the heavier nuances, we know, like, in the series that Barney is very upset by, what his grandmother said to him. But the thing is, we don't exactly get to see the grandmother. We don't exactly hear
Mm.
like what the grandmother said. So I do want. So to some, they probably wonder, would seeing the grandmother and knowing what she said like elevate our connectivity, our connection to Barney, like really understand exactly how hurt Barney is. Like, so I want to ask, like, do you think there's any merit to that in wanting to see the grandmother or hear what she said?
Yeah, it's one of those elements we debated a lot. Um, in order to make the parents, because in the books the parents are completely off screen. They're more this
Mm,
like idea of like transphobia, and they're a lot worse, even though you don't see them. And
mm,
I think, as I said, when we thought about parents watching, we kind of sort of pushed that the worst of that bigotry like onto another sort of slightly on off-screen unseen character. And I think again it was just the idea of people tuning into the show that they've heard like has a trans lead, and them wanting to see themselves represented. I didn't want them to instantly hit this wall of like, if you saw what she was saying, it would be dead naming or just like really bad transphobia. And so
mm.
I just didn't really want to show that. We do show in episode 3 that kind of nightmare version of what happens with a kind of demonic version of his grandmother, and I think that's
Right.
in some ways that is Barney's truth. Like that's how it felt. So that's about as much as we know. And I think also like, even though Barney brings up the dinner as this like really specific event, I think you're supposed to get the idea that it's just like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like the last thing that made him go. Like at the start of the show, his mum says, "Oh, grandma's coming over for dinner again," and it's like they haven't even talked about what happened last time. So
Mm,
that's like that's the moment where Barney thinks, "Actually, I can't go home." And I think, in some ways, he's not just running away to um, escape. I think he's also running away to kind of punish them a bit and teach them a lesson.
mm,
Um, and obviously, like I said, with his brother, with a few other things. I mean, he does. There is a consequence to him running away because he's immediately put in danger. He's like immediately like swept
right.
into this demon adventure. So I, I maybe in a different show we could have shown the actual scene of the actual dinner. But weirdly, in a show of like demons and monsters, I think that would maybe be too scary for
Mm.
the intended audience.
Right. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, because it's like you already have the horror elements with all these demons and stuff, and then but to tackle on like actual real horror of a family member who's just unaccepting, it's like, like we're not trying to traumatize our audience exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I totally get that. It's like, because as you're watching it, it's very subtle. Like you feel the tensions. Like something's uncomfortable, something's wrong here. But I think that subtlety is what works to its advantage, in the fact that it's like where you don't see it all because you don't need to see it all. You just have the tensions to really drive it on. Honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the element that probably speaks more to our older audience. And part of the reason for like Pugsley and Courtney's stories, which are a bit, they're the more cartoony characters, is that there is still these storylines that I think the younger audience will be able to relate to. And like Courtney and Barney's storylines are sort of parallel, or in some ways like reverse. Barney has run away from home. Courtney is a demon who can't go home. And so all those themes of like finding out where you belong and like chosen family and all that stuff, they are a bit subtler with Barney and a bit more grounded. But with Courtney, they're very they're like not subtext or anything. It's very much the text. It's very much, I
Mm,
can't go home. There is a barrier that forces me to not be able to get home. So,
right.
and the show does that a few times with a kind of the text and the subtext saying kind of the same things. Like one example is the second episode, which is it's the episode where Barney comes out as trans to Norma and like to the audience, I guess. And that's sort of the text, but the subtext in the episode is that Pugsley has learnt to talk and is now kind of an unusual creature, and and Pugsley like is really proud and wants to like start talking everywhere, but Barney wants to hide him away, and so in some ways Barney is treating Pugsley like his family have treated him. So and then at the end of the episode, Pugsley like goes to a big parade. And so it's like that's the storytelling that I really like, where you get to talk to the grown-ups and the little kids about kind of the same thing, but at their level, I suppose.
Yeah, I definitely was able to pick up on that. Is that like with Pugsley, you notice it's sort of a parallel with each other, or like a juxtaposition in a sense, in that it's like, Barney is trying to hide himself, well, Pugsley's like, I'm out and proud, let me show myself to the world,
Yeah.
but you see it's like Barney is in that situation where it's like, you're becoming your parents, like that's just not good, obviously. So I think that was, but that's what I say is like the show speaks to people in a very subtle way that I think is what creates such a strong connection with with like adult audiences, definitely. So I remember, I think I saw on your Twitter you mentioned there was definitely a lot of differences, and you even mentioned just a few minutes ago like that there's differences between this series and the books. So how exactly would you say the book differentiates from the series?
Yeah, I mean, so Netflix were very supportive and hands off with the majority of the show, but there were some decisions at the very start which sort of changed the trajectory quite a bit. First of all, it's a very rare item, from what I know, for the author to also showrun the adaptation or create the adaptation, and that wasn't like offered to me as a sort of, that's like not normal. It just so happened that I wrote the books, but I also was an experienced animation director, and I, the book started off as animation and then went back to animation. So I felt that had someone else like bought the rights and I wasn't attached, I would have probably demanded that it sticks pretty close to the books. But as the kind of creator of this world, getting the opportunity to collaborate with other writers and get a budget to tell the version that I would have, wanted to maybe originally, I decided not to, I didn't want to go into the writer's room with all of this like budget and collaboration and experience and all this stuff and say that, no, the way that I wrote the books when I was 20, 21, making a webcomic on Tumblr as I made it up as I went along, that's the best way to tell the story, and that's the only way we should do it. So the pilot, like the episode 1 and chapter 1 of the books are quite similar. One of the only real differences is that in the books, Barney and Norma already are friends when we meet them. And when we realized that the theme of the show was like found family, and I think it was more satisfying to see that happen on screen. So that's the only real difference between the first chapter. And then I started writing a draft of chapter 2, which was just of episode 2, which was just an adaptation of chapter 2 of the books. And it wasn't really working. If people have read the books, chapter 2 is quite a favorite one. It's quite emotional, but it involves them meeting like a new character who's only for that episode. It's like a monster of the week, but the monster is a kind of little child, and they sort of have this adventure, and it has this sort of emotional payoff. And I wanted to adapt that, but then Netflix said that we haven't got to know these characters yet. We haven't got to know Pugsley yet, and you're introducing another like cute animal sidekick that it ended up, and that's kind of going forward. That's most of the changes we made. Was that I think when making a webcomic, especially if you're a little inexperienced, which was what I was when I started the books, you sort of I would problem solve by adding characters. I would like, oh, I want to explore this element. I'll add another character. And it means that, like, in the books, Courtney's not in like half the chapters, and other characters, Logs and Badia, kind of come and go quite a lot. And I think one of the big changes was in the writers' room. We just wanted to explore our main characters as much as possible. So we cut down a lot of secondary and tertiary characters, and like merged quite a few. Like in the books, Norma isn't that obsessed with Pauline or the park, and we made that choice because honestly, because it kind of helped the script to have a character who would like info dump like information and like wanted to be there. Sometimes people write scripts and none of the characters like really want to be there, and it's actually really hard to get them to do plot things. And like Courtney is another character who there's a character in the show called Gord who is this red slug that like appears in some shots, and in the books they're a very different character. They're like a villain, they talk, and their plot line is that they're a demon trapped on Earth that wants to go home. And in the writer's room we found that nugget of plot really interesting, and so we kept trying to write Gord into episodes, but then really struggled to find stuff for Courtney to do. So we just sort of merged those characters. So like, and one other thing that Netflix asked is that in the original comics, the characters were kind of in their 20s. It was much more about like the dead end grind of a job in your 20s. And they asked the characters to be aged down to be teens. And I was like, sure, fine, because I wanted to get my show made. But that was definitely like a little change on the tracks that means that some stories you can't do, some in their 20s it didn't matter that Barney had like run away. Or at least running away means something different. Whereas as he's a teen, it did become much more like, okay, well, we need to see what these parents' reactions to this is. So that was kind of the main shifts. And to be honest, like I don't know how fans of the book feel about the changes. I haven't really seen much of that, but when writing, I kind of hoped that it kind of makes them both unique experiences. There's now like a reason to read the book, watch the show, get something different out of it. And also when we make the show, people don't always know exactly where we're going. We might drop hints, but it could always change.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Like, it's definitely something different is seeing, because that's definitely a different type of route I've seen. Like, I have seen like some people who make a book and then they're the ones to make the series or like the animated series. In this case, it was a short for a YouTube channel first, and then became a book series, and then became a Netflix series full on. So that's already a whole different like almost a genre in and of itself, like a new genre in and of itself somehow. But I think that's honestly what's kind of interesting about it. And then finding out like there are these differences, but they're very much differences that feel like they needed to be made in a sense. Like you and your crew saw this and said, we want to do like, let's do this from different from the book. Let's change this to make this work here and make this part work here. You know, like you can feel all the meticulous like threading going through to make it all somehow work within this series. Because like, I mean, I haven't read the books, I'll admit that, but I'm interested now. But
Yeah, I mean, the show doesn't exist because the books were such a massive success. It's not
mm,
like it's because I was pitching shows, and
mm,
uh, I had developed shows at Disney and Nickelodeon, uh, which had all fallen through. I sort of spent 3 years making a show for the BBC, which is like the British Broadcasting Corporation, and that you know that didn't become a success. So I had like a general meeting at Netflix, and I pitched a bunch of shows, and just one of them was, oh, and I wrote a book, and if you're interested in that, we can
uh,
pitch that. So not many people have read the book, so I didn't feel too much pressure to stick to them. And in the first day
mm,
of the writers' room, I told all the writers, like, what do you like about the book? What don't you like about the book? Like, I was trying to not have an ego about it, because I know they're not perfect. Uh,
mm,
but the show wouldn't have happened without them. Because just if anyone's listening who wants to pitch shows, it's a lot, in my experience, it seems like a lot easier to pitch a show if you can hand them a book which tells them the whole story and all the character designs are already there. Um, but that's kind of a sad state of affairs, I guess.
mm. Yeah, I would imagine it's like sometimes it is a case of like the execs want to see, is there an idea already made and how fast can we just produce it? Because noticeably with Netflix, it is a case of like, we want to just make stuff, make stuff, make stuff. And with something like Dead End, it's more like, oh, you already have the blueprints, so we just got to build it and a few tweaks here and there. So it you do kind of notice that with Netflix in a sense.
Yeah, I think they have a lot shorter pre-production periods than uh, I know that Disney sometimes is developing an idea for years and years and years before they kind of kick it into gear. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea. I think, but we'll see. We'll see.
Did you face like any objections in terms of the LGBTQ plus rep? I know like with Netflix they tend to be a bit more lax, and but I
Yeah.
do wonder, but every now and then sometimes it's like, hey, you can't do that. And with Netflix currently in their state of affairs, it's like, so
No, I genuinely didn't get any pushback, and I'm not just saying that. Um, I've had that pushback at other places,
hmm,
because I've always been trying to make a show like this. But I think because they could read the book and they could see that it was, popular enough. Um, in fact, they the problem was that I sort of had a survival instinct to not mention any of the LGBT stuff in
hmm,
in the early like development phase. Whenever they brought up that content, I would sort of subconsciously change the subject, because I'd been trained that you'd have to like sneak it in somehow later, or
hmm.
only put it in the final episode or something. And they sort of called me out and said that, are you like comfortable talking about this? And I was like,
Hmm.
oh no, I am. I keep thinking I'm going to get fired, which is like how it feels when you're making. Well, I've only made one show, so maybe it feels in every show. But when you're making your first show, there was definitely a few decisions early on where I'm like, yeah, fine, anything. I just want it to like uh, be made. Um,
Hmm.
so maybe next time I'll have a bit more backbone. But yeah, I never had to fight anyone, and I'm very happy to say that.
All right. That's actually, I'm actually glad that you were able to get through without any cases of like, oh, there's this massive amount of pushback. Because I was talking to a friend of mine early, like a while back, like, saying it's like it is different now from back then when it's like, oh, it always had to be very subtle last episode type stuff, but now it's like we could be as blatant as possible now. You could just say this stuff. You don't have to like shortcut it or try to hide it or nothing. It's like just be honest about it and just be you could be real about it. I mean, I know it can vary from, network to network, but
Mm.
it's still interesting to see that type of, I guess, growth happening within the industry to be able to just allow LGBTQ plus rep to just run freely now.
Yeah, and I would say that uh, almost every single moment of that kind of rep in cartoons has come from creators like risking quite a bit to fight for that. Um, I don't think it's quite the case that like it's the studios pushing for it. I think
Mm-hmm.
often you see that representation in spite of the studios.
Right. Right. And kind of speaking towards the studios, like oftentimes there can be cases in like animated shows where the style can change from like the initial concept, in this case, like the books, and it usually can be in the sense of making the animation easier. So, with the show, there is a difference between how the books look and how the series looks. So, what exactly caused this like art style change?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as the writing where I I tried my best not to be a control freak egomaniac. I
Mm-hmm.
maybe one day that's what I'll become, but I was working with really great people. Our art director Domi Fox is stunning. Like the whole reason why I think like as particularly the backgrounds, the way that the park looks and the kind of detail in that is really impressive, and all the colors. Um, with the characters, we started off with my designs. We got um, some some freelance people in as well to just like play around with the designs and trying to find a balance between something that was animatable with our budget, because I was a bit self-conscious while making the show that we didn't have the budget, but some shows do. We don't have the budget of Arcane or Cuphead or a few other Netflix shows, so we were
Right.
always trying to make something kind of ambitious for what we could. So yes, I know the show is like puppeted animation, and
Hmm.
the designs are kind of simple, but we made it so that we could finish it. We try to
Right.
make something that we could actually make, and we're like a small UK studio. This is our first show. I think that's another bit of context a lot of people don't know, because they just see the Netflix logo and think that Netflix made it. Um,
Right.
I mean, even the credits, there's no one from Netflix is on the credits. They
Hmm.
did commission it; it is theirs, but it's made by Blink Industries, which most people know from "Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared," which is that like
Oh.
crazy puppet show. Um, they've made that, and they've made this. um,
Oh.
so a lot of us, I mean, a lot of the crew had worked on a few shows like Gumball, which is made in the UK, which a lot of people don't know. Uh, but we don't have the same constant conveyor belt of new animated shows like Burbank and places. So
Hmm.
most of our crew had never worked on a show like this, and if they had, it would be Gumball, which is now a few years old. There's a show called Elliot from Earth that came out recently that some of our team worked on.
Hmm.
Um, there was a 101 Dalmatian Street was another UK thing that we took a lot of storyboarders and animators from. So we're not, I mean, they're so talented. I'm so in awe of them, but we didn't, we had to like build a whole animation pipeline ourselves, and did a lot of reading of like making of books of stuff like Steven Universe and like trying to work out how to make a show.
Hmm. Right.
And then the pandemic happened, so we had to kind of learn it all again. Uh,
Uh,
so in terms of art style, it was just collaboration. Like I just wanted the input of people who knew better, and I wanted it to be everybody who worked on its show, not just mine.
right. Nah, I totally get that. Like, that is diff that is interesting that it's like this was a show commissioned by Netflix in a sense versus because it's not like they just it's obviously it's not made in house, it's just
Mm.
overseas now, but they still retain the full rights to it.
Yeah, I mean they did a lot of effort to treat us like we were one of their in-house shows, and we like did a big presentation to all the other show crews. They would always update me about other shows. They put me in contact with a lot of other Netflix showrunners, which was nice. But it was still a UK production, and I don't know. I'm really proud of it. If I do see people complain about the art style, it just completely washes off me because all I see is like, well, we made a TV show, like in a pandemic, in a country that doesn't make shows like this very much. So I'm just really proud of it.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely could say it's one of those shows where for some people it is a case of maybe they look at the style and it's like, I'm not sure. But then you actually look at it and watch it, you realize, oh, there's definitely more to this show than you would first think. Like it is definitely a don't judge a book by its cover type of deal, you know.
I mean, I see a lot of people say, it looks like a Tumblr webcomic from 2014. And I'm like, it's an adaptation of a Tumblr webcomic from 2014. Like, it's not an insult to me. I'm like, yeah, I know, it looks like that. I'm maybe, not every show I'll make from now on will look like that. But with the writing and the designs, it just was a constant dance between trying to make something new and also make it look like the books and keep it familiar. So yeah.
All right. So there's a character who it definitely I feel is a major resonant among like neurodivergent people, with myself included in that crowd. And so I do want to ask: is like, was she meant to be a representation of neurodivergency? I know, like, a lot of people see her as part of the autism spectrum, possibly, but would you want to like clarify exactly if she is or isn't?
Yeah, Norma is autistic. The story of making that decision is kind of interesting because in the webcomics I never said that. I was just writing her to be relatable. And then I thought that's how everyone thought and how everyone sort of saw the world. And then when autistic readers said like, oh, I really headcanon her as this, or she's really relatable to me, I kind of thought, oh, okay, I'll write her that way. And then so when we came to make the show, we had an autism consultant and we had our scripts checked, and she said, wow, you must have done a lot of research. And I was like, not really. And so long story short, it was through making the show that I got diagnosed with autism, and it like made a lot of things make sense. And I kind of not everyone needs like professional diagnosis, but it helped me get the sort of confidence to write her how I wanted to, I guess. And yeah, most of what Norma goes through is my experiences, and especially stuff about how like her special interests in Pauline give her a lot of joy, but there is consequence. Not to spoil too much of the show, but that feeling of, I guess, being disappointed in someone that you've looked up to, which I know a lot of people can experience, but I think when it's like your special interest, when it's so much of your life, it can properly short circuit your brain. Like it can really affect you. But other than that, I mean, we I guess we talk a bit more specifically about her anxiety on the kind of, there's a beach episode where for 2 episodes we've seen Norma kind of super confident when it comes to like demons and the park and all of that stuff, but the like just hanging out and chilling on a beach with people is the thing that makes her the most scared.
Mm.
So yeah, a lot of people in the writers' room drew from their experiences, and all throughout the crew actually. When it came to like her design, her animation, the storyboarding, we tried to. We like had a few things about her that we wanted to. We were really conscious about her eye line and if she would look people straight in the eye, which she only does
Right.
it. She only does occasionally. So yeah, I'm actually really glad that people have been bringing her up a lot in it, like viewers and stuff, because all the press I did before the show, like she was almost never mentioned. Even in the
Mm.
trailers, she wasn't really in them very much. And I get why, and I think Barney's the more obvious talking point, I suppose.
Mm. Mm.
But it didn't bother me because I knew that when people watch the show, that the Norma storyline would like sneak up on them and they'd realize it was like really major part of the show.
Oh yeah, I think I think that was what kind of caught me off guard a little bit with her, is that it's like, oh, they're finally being blatant that it's like she very much is autistic. They don't like, you don't mention it exactly, but it's like you see the behavioral patterns. And it's interesting to know that you said that basically you were like writing her from the perspective of someone who, from experience, basically, like you
Yeah.
were writing her from experience. And so that's, I think that's what really makes her like feel like such a genuine character, because she is a genuine like character. Like she's written genuinely, because it's like this is from someone who has been diagnosed as autistic, like who is on
Mm.
the spectrum. So I think that's what makes her, I think that's what I think so many people are like connecting with so much, is that it's like, oh, you're writing an autistic person written as a regular person, you know, that with their mannerisms and everything, their obsessions and all that, their hyper obsessions and such, and you know, their uh what is the stemmings and such.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I I think that's what many people are going to take away, is that this feels like a very genuine type of series, to be coming from all these different angles, clearly with with a very diverse crew, like from different backgrounds, who can put their all into it and make sure it feels like this is what the real experience is, not just someone's imaginations from watching TV or so, like actually people who lived like this, you know. I think that's just what's so strong about this series, honestly.
Thank you. I mean, when I made the webcomic, I never really thought of the comic as quote unquote diverse. I just was,
Mm-hmm.
the show is, despite having demons and stuff, it is set in the real world, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
people in the real world meeting this kind of supernatural world. So it didn't, I don't know, it's like a no brainer to represent the real world as the people that I know and the people that, like, none of the characters are like specifically based on friends of mine, but it's like my friend group. Like, that's just kind of how we are. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad it's resonated.
Yeah, I honestly could see this standing up among a lot of people in the animation community as like a major like favorite of theirs that they just absolutely are in love with, for
Thank you.
real.
Thank
So, so I would want to ask, who would you say is like your favorite character?
you. uh oh, that's like choosing your children. I I mean, I'll quickly say why I like all of them. Like, Barney is definitely the closest I have to what you'd consider an OC, I suppose. Like, even before
Right.
the YouTube short, I was drawing that kind of character. Uh in the books, he like becomes a wrestler, and so I was always drawing this like blue haired chubby wrestler character. And then obviously I just said why Norma means a lot to me. Pugsley is like, I always think he's the one that people sort of instantly love quickest because he's just a funny dog. And then
Mm.
as the show goes on, you like, he does have these levels, but he kind of just keeps the tone light throughout. Maybe I might agree with the fan base who seem to have really, really enjoyed Courtney, because I've seen a lot of posts which were like, wow, the show is so diverse. It really represents all this stuff, perfectly. Also me, Courtney is my favorite character. Like, I like this demon thing. But I think the reason why I love Courtney's design. She's so fun to draw, and like big fangs, big eyes, all that stuff. But there's like a little bit of all the other characters in Courtney. Like, I compared Courtney trying to get home to Barney's storyline. I think Courtney, like Norma, maybe doesn't quite interact with the real world how they're supposed to, or finds it really hard to relate to people. And like Pugsley has this kind of supernatural, crazy energy. So I'll say Courtney, just because they're the most fun to like storyboard, to write for. Courtney dialogue is always really fun to write. So that's how I'm feeling today. But if you ask me tomorrow, it would probably be different.
Okay. I will admit, Courtney felt very different as I was watching her, but I noticed this one joke y'all told in like episode 2. It was around the end, and Courtney's just like sitting on a washing machine, and then the washing machine, like, she's just all happy and giddy. At first you're thinking, okay, she's just enjoying that a little too much. Then it goes off, she's like, oh, it's like, am I just dirty minded, or did they just do what I think they did?
Look, Courtney's just this demon. Courtney likes a thrill, likes a fun time. I'll confirm nor deny what's going on there.
All right, then. So, with the end of this first season, we saw, everything's resolved in the sense of, they fought off the Demon King and, his sister. But then we find out there's something possibly bigger happening with some involving angels. Mm-hmm. So is there any like hints you want to mention that might happen sometime in like for possible a future season or so?
Yeah, if we get more seasons, you'll be going up and down that elevator. You'll start to realize, I think, the context of why the demons invaded Earth, why what a demon king is, and that kind of hierarchy. There's like a few references to angels in the last episodes. We find out Courtney's cuffs were put there by the angels, so and they're in the books, so they have this, they're kind of an authority sort of body. I don't know what to call it. Like they're in charge, and I guess we'll have to wait and see if they're benevolent or not. I will say that like it's really fun that people have been picking up on that final moment at the end. I didn't want to leave them on too much of a cliffhanger. Like, it still has a nice resolution, that episode, but it's nice to hint at, if they go in the elevator, you see there's loads of buttons, and I want to press all of them and show you every floor, I suppose.
All right. So I will say, it'd be interesting when you do the angels, if it's like, because I don't know if you've seen like this thing where the biblically accurate angels, and they're like these eldritch monster freakish things with like they're just made up of eyeballs and feathers and wings and stuff, and it's like, okay, like it just would be funny to me if y'all did something like that.
Yeah, so they're in the books, and I got a lot of comments from people saying, oh, you're inspired by Bayonetta, and I'm not saying I'm not, but I think we and Bayonetta are both drawing off that thing where angels are terrifying. And it's funny that like the sort of angel phrase is "be not afraid," and it's the scariest thing you can say. So anyway, so we're playing off of that. I think I actually saw a tweet from a fan today, and I scrolled through all of it. I've seen everything. Which was saying that they theorize that the angels won't be completely good or completely bad, and the demons aren't completely good or completely bad. And I think that's, like I was saying, that's kind of the nuance I like playing in. So that's they're a different style of culture and society than the demons, but we'll have to wait and see if that's good or bad.
All right, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to more Dead End Paranormal Park and keeping up with Barney and them's adventures. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more.
Thank you.
But really, I want to say thank you for joining me and taking in all these questions and just chatting it up. You've been a pleasure. I'm really glad to have you on.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Sit Down and Think, and always remember, people, it's just a thought. The opinions expressed in this are of the individual guest and only of the individual guests and not of their employers.